Well, good morning everyone. Time to crack on with another stream. Today, by request, we're going to be not writing music as such, because this will take a little bit of time, but we're going to be putting together a little synthesizer I think would be a great idea to make, which is a sort of rough emulation, and I do mean rough emulation, of a Roland TB303 in Reactor, which should be, I think, fun for everyone. We're not going to get into the sequencer or anything like that, but we are going to get into, first of all, building it in blocks, which is the easy way of doing it and is very experimental. You can get all sorts of things going on with that, and I'll show you a few ways to sort of push your sound beyond what you could do with the TB303, although we won't be able to get sort of a very close emulation. And then I'm going to have a look at how you might be able to make it in Core as well. Again, nothing too complicated, using stuff that's already there. So this is going to be, if you're not super comfortable in Reactor, this is going to be a sort of good beginning project, I would say. It's going to get you familiar with the basic concepts of Reactor. You're not going to have to actually generate your own code. If you want to make the sequencer, you have to generate your own code. I would suggest it's not there in Reactor. And that's no bad thing. We don't think it to be too easy. So, first of all, the easy one. We're going to do some blocks. And I'm going to chuck in Reactor 6. So an instrument Reactor 6. I'm going to make a new channel with that in my sequencer. Now, lots of people like working with Reactor as a standalone thing. It's certainly a little bit quicker to work with Reactor as a standalone thing. A standalone program. But I actually prefer working with it in the sequencer because I can easily chuck in MIDI and I will know at that point that I trust the DAW to send the MIDI correctly. Whereas if I'm making a little sequence in Reactor itself, there's every possibility that I've made a bug somewhere in my little sequencer and it's not sending out MIDI correctly. If it's receiving MIDI from Studio One, I know that the problem is not the MIDI, it's something I've done within the synth architecture. So that's why I like programming this way. So, blank Reactor patch. I'm going to go up here, click File, and then I'll click New. And that will immediately open up this view. I'm going to get rid of the panel view to start with. I don't want that. As I'm just left with the schematic view where it's got inputs and outputs if I wanted to build an effect. And you'll note up here it's gone red. That means this is unsaved. I'm working with an unsaved copy of the program. So I'm going to click that and set up a save file. And so I don't get confused with stuff I'm actually going to use. I'm going to make a new folder here. And I'm going to call that Twitch Ensembles. I'll jump into that folder and then I'm going to call this 303 blocks. So now it's saved and that red light's gone away, which means that until I modify the structure again, I'm good to go. And the good news is that nearly everything we want comes with blocks. There's one module, and it is kind of an important one, where you need to have access to the Reactor user library. And for a very good reason, I would suggest, which is that the filter we need is a user creation. We could probably work on converting one of the core filters to get similar sounds, but that's not by no means straightforward. So let's start at the beginning. What do we need? Every single synth we ever build, we need to know what MIDI note is being played. So if we start with that, MIDI note is over here. So I've gone into the magnifying glass and then I've gone to library and now I'm in Reactor blocks. And this is all stuff that comes with Reactor. And I want int, and I'm assuming that stands for internal, and that's notein.ism. I'm just going to drag that and chuck it down there. So now my patch will know what note is being played. And on every single oscillator, every single synth, you're going to want a sound creation device. And in this particular case, there's several different options, and I'll drop in a couple, and then we'll jump around to the panel, and I'll explain why I choose the one I do for this 303. Because it's not completely clear. You'd think, surely an oscillator is an oscillator. No, they've all got subtle variations. And this particular oscillator does something similar to what it should do. So there's the bento box oscillator, and the other one that really stuck out for me, well, there's two actually, was the monarch oscillator. And I think it's in here. Guess what? I didn't go for this one. Yeah, it's that one. And two of these I'm completely comfortable with, really. But I went for one because I think it's just slightly easier to work with. So I'm going to jump right into the panel. And we'll have a look at them. So, the 303 produces two waves. One of which is a saw wave. And one of which is a square wave. And now immediately I'm going to put that in commas. Saw wave and square wave. Because neither is either. The square wave in a 303 is derived from the saw wave, as that is in it's a sort of they morph the shape of the square. They morph the shape of the saw wave to generate the shape of the square wave. You do not get a perfect square wave, and you don't start with a perfect saw wave. So neither one is actually right. And this is my problem with the monarch oscillator. I wonder if I can demonstrate this to you. And this will be where I find out actually it's really good for the purpose. There is a scope in here somewhere. Let's chuck that in. And I'm just going to set up a simple pitch thing. I wonder if I can actually get this going just to show you very quickly. That's not going to generate sound, but that's not a problem. I'm not looking for sound, I'm looking to look at the waveform. Okay, so that is, as you all know, an absolutely perfect square wave. And an absolutely perfect saw wave. And for various reasons, you don't get that out of a 303. So let's try a different oscillator and see what we get. Again, that's a saw wave, square wave. It's an absolutely perfect square wave. And that's our saw wave. An absolutely perfect saw wave. Which is not right. Now, one of the things you might try, you'll see on them on an actual 303, if I actually start talking sense, what you'll see on an actual 303 is that the oscillator is full of curves. And let's chuck this down a long way, and I'll move this round. You see, there's a square wave, which obviously is not what we're after. And there's the saw wave. Again, not what we're after. You'll see that one of the most important things you can notice with the 303 sound is that the square wave and the saw wave actually have curves in them. They're not angular, they're curved and distorted by nature, but we'll get to that. But we need to put in that curve, and a lot of that is generated from there's a high pass filter in the actual signal chain which removes the curve, but part of it is due to the fact that the square wave is generated in such an unusual way. And none of these oscillators, or any of the blocks oscillators, actually produce that kind of shape by standard. So it can be very, very difficult to get the exact sound of a 303 oscillator. And we'll have a little go with this, and we'll pick an oscillator. We'll do it that way. But I think I have a suspicion I already know which one I want. The next thing we're going to need is a filter, and I don't use any of the filters that come with Reactor blocks. None of them are quite right. In the Reactor user library, there is a fantastic filter, which is perfect for what we're trying to do, and honestly takes out a huge amount of the difficulty of getting this job done. And it is unsurprisingly called Acid Filter. So log into the Reactor user library, grab this, which is Acid Filter, and then just sling it into your ensemble. And that really is that. It's not a looker. It looks just like that. I'm just going to drop that in there. We'll organise our panel later on. I'm working on the schematic at the moment. And this is based, I believe, on one of the standard filters in Reactor blocks. I believe it's based upon the Sankey filter, which is going to be in Boutique. It's based on, whoops, I didn't even do that. It's based on that filter. If you know Reactor blocks, you know that filter pretty well. And the reason it's based on that filter is that it has a high pass built into it, which does what we want to do in many ways to the sound. So we're going to put, we could do this with using a mixer. I don't really honestly think it makes a lot of difference. So we're going to chuck the output of the bento box oscillator, I'll move these down for a second, into the acid filter. And we're going to have a look at what that does to the waveform. And you will see that we are now getting a quite different shape out of our oscillator. Something that looks really quite different. And if I move this further around still, again, we're getting a very different shape. And now a lot of that's due to the resonance, as you can see. But not all of it. Some of it's due to the feedback. So this high pass filter here, I believe, is actually in the feedback. And there's also a low pass filter as well. And finally, we also need an amplitude envelope. We have to be able to control the volume of the synth. So that's going to require an amplitude envelope. So let's jump around into Bento, because the VCA... Oh no, is it in util? I can never remember this. Where everything is in the unique ways they put them. Yeah, there we go. Amp VCA. So we'll put that on. And we'll feed the output into the amp. And I'm going to put the output of the amp into the scope as well. And we'll have a little peek at that. I'm going to turn the gain up. And you think, why would I want to have a look at that? Because of that there. This is a high pass filter at the very end of the signal, which is good practice. You should always, as a last step, have a very, very low high pass filter on a synth you design, and that will remove DC offset from your signal, essentially. And you note that that's put a curve in. So I'm going to remove all of these so you can see quite clearly what's going on. That's put a curve in on our waveform, and that is exactly the sort of thing that we want. It still doesn't correct this, although it's much, much nearer what you'd expect to see from a 303. But it's just kind of not dirty enough, really. That is what you expect to see from a 303. That's not completely right, but we can't have everything, I guess. I could turn the gain on that down a little bit. That's very much the sort of shape you'd expect to see from a square wave on a 303. So, just by switching that, we are getting far nearer what we want. So, now we have to, in some way, make sense of all this. And to be honest, I go with this oscillator here because even though it's not a legitimate feature, then this is a point of what I want to talk about. there's a sort of obsession with the 303 sound. That's fantastic. It's incredibly limited, and you could say it's an incredibly flexible sound too. And what you can do with that one sound is incredibly flexible, but the actual palette of sounds is incredibly limited. So why not you make use of an oscillator that can go between saw and square? That's just to your advantage. It gives you exactly the same spectrum of sounds, but much more flexibility. So for me, I don't want the monarch oscillator because it can only do that. I can get a variable width pulse wave going on, which you can't do with the 303, or I could get a bassier signal here, in effect, which is useful, but not actually really what I'm after. That will mix the triangle and the square wave together, but fundamentally, this oscillator is much more limited by design, and I don't actually want it, so I'm losing the monarch oscillator. Easiest way to do it isn't here. I'm going to delete that. This is a Roland copy, but it has sync, and also sub oscillators, which it's more of a 101 sound generator, to be honest. And I don't want that either. I'm just going to stick with the bento box oscillator. This does what I want it to do. It's easy to work with. I really like the oscillator, so I'm just going to stick with that. It doesn't look like a 303, but who cares about that? It's going to do what we want it to do, and that right there is pretty much our structure, at least to start with. And it's generating sound already. I jump around onto the panel. I'm going to turn that down, all the way down. And the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to actually control the VCA. So when we hit a note on the MIDI keyboard, we want the VCA to open up and play the sounds that the oscillator and the filter are making. So we need envelopes for that, and the envelopes we're going to use are completely imperfect. In fact, I would say the envelopes are the single biggest problem that we have in generating this sound through Reactor blocks. They're just not quite up to it. They're not advanced enough. So we're going to need 2 envelopes, and that is not what you would get on a 303. Typically you'd have 1 envelope, but because of how we're working, and again, there's good limitation and bad limitation. Having one envelope to control both the amp and the filter shape, I think that's bad limitation. That's not helpful. That's just frustrating. So I wouldn't recommend you go for that. I would use 2 envelopes. You could just plug both of these in to the filter and the amplitude envelope, but I wouldn't recommend that. So I'm going to rename this for clarity on the panel. I'm going to call this amp. I'm going to call this one filter, which makes it nice and clear what I'm doing with each. And the output from the amp envelope I send to mod A of our VCA, and the output from our filter envelope I send into mod A of our filter. And that's kind of that. So I'm now going to jump around to the panel, and now I'm going to make sense of this, because this is a mess. So I like to patch the synth in the order it goes, in the order the signal goes through the synth, if that makes sense. So the first thing that happens is I send a MIDI note in, it hits the oscillator, it hits the filter, the signal from the signal from the oscillator goes into the filter, and the signal from the filter goes into the VCA, just like that, just like that. And I'll keep the scope where it is, and the filter envelope controls the filter, and the amp envelope controls that. So nice and simple. I've got my audio signal here. I can move that over there. Dear oh dear. There we go. And then I've got my modulators underneath. So let's set this up so it works in the same way that a 303 would work roughly. Now the good news is that blocks are always monophonic, which is exactly what we want. And then legato, because you can do slides, the classic 303 slides. So we'll switch that into legato, and we're going to put the legato time, the portamento time even, we're going to move that up. But it's really important to set that when you actually program your patch, your MIDI notes. And you just do that by ear, it's not a big deal. If you're setting up a sequencer, you might want to do it so it was, say, 1/16 long. But we're going to do it by ear, it's not a big deal at all. And then I'll swap these around because they're the wrong way around. There we go. Then we're going to set up, nothing to do with the filter yet, we're going to set up the amp. And we just want that fully modulated. And that's right, because if you remember, we're still playing and there's a MIDI note there. So I'm going to get rid of that MIDI note. And that stops that playing. And technically speaking, I'm going to reduce the sustain time to about 20 milliseconds, just to make sure it doesn't click. And we're just going to, just for now, we're just going to put in some notes. I'll move the oscillator up and pitch again because it's 4 octaves down at the moment. That should be bearable. Pretty standard sound. Sounds like any other synth, really. I'll take the output of the whole thing out a bit down, just to save my ears. And that's how our filter sounds, roughly. And you can hear how much of the sound comes from the filter. So let's try setting up. Interesting, if I plug that into the wrong one. Yeah, I have, there we go. The other thing to say is, by standard, the SF filter comes with key tracking turned on. For a 303, you don't want that. 303s don't have key tracking filters. So let's set this up so it's correct. This is essentially your envelope control. And you could change that slightly. You could make it so you had a discrete envelope control using a CV mixer, or you could just use this control here. But what you should do is try and emulate how velocity or accents work in the 303. And switch on that velocity switch there. And also you can change the shape of your envelope to try and make it more closely mirror what you might find in a 303, which is a curved envelope response, because again it's been through a high pass filter. And that will make the envelope response curved. Okay, so at that point in the tune I was writing, where I was requested to demonstrate what I'd done to generate a 303 sound, that is all I'd done. That's it. So what you should see is that most of it is in how I set the controls on that synth. And I go for 30-second patterns. And I keep it simple. And the other thing to bear in mind is that classic 303 sounds always comes is through a 16-step sequencer, so you're probably going to be dealing in steps which are 1/16 long. But the way that works, the gate timing on that works, is slightly strange. It's set at 7/12. So in other words, you're looking at something which is about 58%. So if you use an arpeggiator to simulate that, say, you want to set your gate time to about 58%. or just over 30 seconds in time. And with my release on the amp setup just slightly longer than that, I'm probably at about 58%, if that makes sense. So I'm doing it by eye and ear, but that's pretty much the right time. And try not to put in too many notes in terms of pitches. At least I find that to be the case. And get a few slides in there. Slides are really going to help you get your sound right. Now, I start playing at that point. 143 sounds like a reasonable tempo. Okay, so let's stretch this up. And it kind of sounds getting there already. And we're going to use velocity to make this a bit more interesting. And with this filter, I find it quite useful to not overdo this modulation here. It's up to you, of course, and each patch is different. You can hear their aliases quite badly. So what you'd be wise to do is oversample. Hey! Thanks Dave. Thanks for following David Chevy. Much appreciated. And also we need to obviously set these sounds here, the decay time is not right. And 303s have kind of a little bar at the front as the envelope opens. It's not tight shut, you get a little bar. Let's try a little bit of the square wave. You've got to be quite careful with this filter how high you open it, because to me at the very top ends it doesn't sound right. But there, it sounds amazing. I'm going to save that now before it crashes, as Reactor sometimes does. So what you'll notice is that there's several things that we can't do effectively using these envelopes, and they're the only envelopes that come in blocks. One of the things we can't do is build the signal up if we re-trigger it before it's finished shutting. So what will happen to the voltage in a 303 is you open the filter, is it does, I've got to remember to reverse it, it's so hard. It goes up and then it comes down. So you hit the key, it goes up and then it comes down. But if you hit the key again before it's finished coming down, the charge on the capacitor has not dissipated and it builds up higher and higher and higher each time you trigger the note before it's finished releasing its envelope setting. You can't do that in blocks without programming your own envelope, which I'm in no hurry to do. I've done it before. And it's not that bad. You've got to track various bits of data. I'm not doing that in blocks at the moment. Life is too short for me. I'd rather write music. So what you can do is cheat slightly, because the other thing we can't do is properly simulate accent, as in an on-off state. But you can pretend using velocity. So I can simulate rising envelope sound using velocity, and that multiplies the output of the envelope, which is exactly right. So I make the envelope open more and more and more and gradually fade away into nothing using velocity. And you could also put it on the output of the amplitude. You could also, and this is not a bad call at all, use velocity to modulate another VCA. You could put another VCA in here, in between the oscillator and the filter, and drive the filter harder according to the velocity of the velocity of the synth. But I would actually use an extra envelope for that, and maybe you just do it there using drive, and I'll explain why. Well, no, actually, because of how we set it up, it'll be fine. So what I'm going to do is we'll jump around here. No, I changed my mind again. I'm going to use a separate envelope, and the reason is I don't want to control the actual output of the synth with velocity. I just want to control the drive. But it's going to be exactly the same as this amp. So I'll jump into... There we go. I wonder if it looks strange. So I'm going to copy this envelope. I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to call it drive. It needs a gate signal. And I need another VCA. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it. Actually, no, I don't need that. I can just do it on the drive control. So the output of that goes into mod B. I jump back to the panel. I'm going to put on velocity on that envelope. I'm going to go to B. I'm going to up that a bit. So let's listen to it now. Now that really sounds pretty goddamn 303 to me. Is it perfect? No, not by a long shot, but it's actively 303 sound. I'm going to turn this back down, save myself some CPU cycles. So enough of that. That is, I would say, how you build a 303 in Reactor blocks. And I'll save that again because I liked the change I made by modulating the drive with the extra envelope. And I'm going to call that block 303 blocks. Now, what if we wanted to do something more complicated? What if we wanted to do that in core? Because we fancied a little bit more control over those envelopes. Or we fancy building a sequencer. I'll show you why you can't build well, it's not easy. Of course, you can build anything you want. The problem is that there isn't a sequencer in here that in blocks as standard, which has 16 steps. Of all the obvious things that I thought they would have put in, it would have been a 16-step sequencer, but they didn't. So we can't do that. There's an 8-step sequencer, and you would have to modulate that. And it's such a shame because it would be absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. So that could be your little project, I would suggest. Would be to make the 8-step sequencer a 16-step sequencer. It's not that hard. Let's have a look in it. See how hard it would be. We'll move it across. Yeah, I'm not even sure where it keeps its brain, to be honest. So maybe that would be quite the challenge. It's a little bit annoying. There are third-party 16-step sequences available, and I'll show you one right now. But it doesn't feel right. It may even be able to do what I want it to do, but it doesn't feel right. And the first one that I've come across that I thought was really up to it was in a collection from the Reactor library called Nouveau Collection. And there's some cool stuff in here. Several different filters. But the one that we're after in this particular case was this one, which opens up a... Oh, no. Not you. Nearly you. So he's got quite a lot of stuff in here. Not that one either. I'm losing my mind. Which one was it? I swear it's a 32 step. Let's have a look at it when it's actually the 16 step even. Let's have a look at it when it's in the actual panel. I might just use a different picture. Yeah, there we go. So it's that one. And that has everything, but you have to set gate times on each individual step, which is a complete pain in the ass. Individual slide times, pain in the ass. Why not just use one knob for the octave and semi? Don't know. That's more than I want for a 303. That's quite involved and precise programming. It's not quick, and it's not really what I had in mind. So much as that's a fantastic module, and it's fantastic for modular synthesis, that's not what I had in mind. And honestly, I find it easier to just program in the piano roll. What else could you do using blocks or external blocks, say, to change the sound of things? Well, you don't have to stick with you don't have to stick with a very simple waveform going into your filter. You could modify it quite heavily. And one of my favourite things for that, oh no, I'm in the wrong thing, is if I go into another library called React. And React is a library in the Reactor user library, and it's rammed full of pretty much amazing blocks. So these are due displays, manual gates, all sorts of things. But what I want here is an effect. And someone clever, the guy who wrote this, I don't know his name, but it will certainly say in Reactor user library, is this timbre module. And this timbre module relies on something that came out in, I think it was Blocks 1.1, and it's the crazy oscillator from the West Coast, which I'll just drop in. And it's a wave folder and shaper. It's this section here, and he's fixed it so that it doesn't need to be driven by the DWG oscillator. It has its own unique oscillator built in, and it just modulates the sound that you're putting into it, which is amazing. CPU heavy, and you've got to be careful with oscillation, because I don't think it was really designed to take waves like that. Not oscillation, aliasing. But this allows us to wave fold our oscillator, which can give us some really complicated, almost FME type sounds. So I'm going to drop the West Coast out, and we're going to plug in this this unit here. I'm going to have to up the sampling rate quite considerably, but let's start playing. I'll drop the scope down now, put that in the right place, which is there. And I just play around this. until it starts giving me interesting tones. So that's not a standard. That's actually changed the octave. Now it kind of sounds like it's been through a static phaser. Kind of strange woody sound to it. So you can do all sorts of interesting things with units like this. And so your Reactor is full of crazy sounds. Another fantastic one. A lot of them are quite similarly named, which is not great. But down here in effects, I think it's not that one. I don't mean that one. This one? Yeah, that one. The wave folder. The wave folder can do fantastic things. Similar to the last one. Almost like sync. So you can do all sorts of things to your sounds. You don't need to be stuck with the classic 303 sounding blocks, but you can't really simulate the envelopes correctly. Stuff like that. So let's save that. Yes. And I'll stop running that and mute it out. So let's try and do the same thing, not using blocks, because we can get slightly different behaviour. It's a bit more flexible. We can make it how we want it. So React 6, we're going to make another one. I'm going to rename this so I don't get confused. Not in blocks. I'm going to call this 303 core. And this won't be as easy. And I might not finish this today because this is now a slightly more substantial project. So again, I'll just open up a new ensemble. Move it over here. Okay, so built-in modules. And we're going to try and use as much as we can rather than reinvent the wheel each time. We'll use what is in there. Yes, please. That's fantastic. So pitching, I think pitching gate is the one I want. Let's have a little look. Yeah. I'm so rusty at this side of Reactor though. That's the real problem. Okay, we'll do it the hard way then. Fine. So. Morning everyone. Sorry, I was stuck on the wrong list. Nice to see you all. Let's jump in and go. What am I even looking for here? Built-in module, I want Midian, I want note pitch. I want gates. And these are both going to be monophonic rather than polyphonic. Everything's going to be mono on this. Voices 1, lock voices. That needs to be monophonic as well. So I'm going to rename this MIDI. Oh. And let's, for the first bit at least, let's just get a very simple oscillator and envelope working. So I need 2 output ports to come out of this macro. And that's going to be MP and MG, which is MIDI pitch and MIDI gate. And let's have a look at the core oscillators. I can't remember what we've got in here. So in the library, audio oscillator. Nothing jumps out at me as being perfect for what I'm after, but we'll go for this 4-wave. And the frequency of this is in hertz, so I need to convert MIDI pitch to hertz. Convert, and there we go. Pitch to frequency. I need to tell the oscillator what the sample rate is. That's easy. I just go to pick up sample rate. That's now connected. Pitch to frequency gets connected in. I need an input to this, and I need to make sure it's the right sort of input. I'm going to call it an audio rate signal. And I need output from the oscillator as well. And I obviously want the saw and the pulse wave. I'm not going to bother with reset or pulse width. That will certainly be something you can look at, is a variable pulse width. And I'll rename that saw and pulse. And just for now, I'm just going to use a really simple AHDSR. Unlock that. I'll move it out of the way. Simply because it's pre-made and I want to, as simply and quickly as possible, check that I haven't screwed up anything in my oscillator. So let's check that. Oh. Interesting. That's quite a long way I've zoomed out. I'll copy the MIDI down. And across. And sadly no sound. So I've got to figure out what I've done wrong. To do that, I can do various things. I can switch on my view and enable debugging. Enable wire debugging. So I'm getting signal there. It's going in there, but nothing's coming out there. That's because, and the reason is because that's not an audio. There we go. So that's working for pitch. And the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure, I want to get the right. I'm going to change the envelope because I don't want that envelope. I want to use one of the core ones. Delete. So new core cell, I jump in, go to the library. And here we go. So they've got ARs and they've got ADSRs. Let's have a look at the AR. I don't think this will do quite what we want it to do. No. Delete module. We need a more advanced module, which is a shame because the AR would be absolutely perfect. Delete module. Do I mean the ADSR? And this is what I'm talking about, which is zero reset mode. This is the fundamental problem that we have. Not this stream, doing they? I'm trying to help someone out here. So this is reset 0. Attack always starts from 0. Attack starts from a current. I know what I'll do. Hold your horses. You can hear me sing. Ooh. I'm lucky that was muted. You can hear me sing, Duende. This is me singing. And that's all you get, because that's all I've written of that. That's me 5 times overlaid on itself, which is nice. So yeah, back to Reactor. This 0 reset is what I was talking about, where the envelope gets higher and higher. That's what we want. So we're going to set that to quick constant 1. That's perfect. And this has changed radically since I last used it, which is a shame. A lot of this I no longer understand, so we're going to just try to crack on with it. And this is what happens if you don't check what you're doing before you start streaming. I'm glad you liked it. Well, I definitely need that connected into clock rate. Standard, there we go. And I'm going to need controls for all of these. So these are going to be terminal inputs but they're going to be event inputs. I don't need a control for that. That's going to be 0. That can be a constant. So no hold time, it's just going to be an ADSR. I'll rename these. When I've written some lyrics to it, I'll put them in. And I think we're going to want sort of judging from what I'm reading here, we're going to want this to be both of these to be plus curves. So quick constant, I'm going to make them both 5 and see how it sounds. And velocity sensitivity, we do want the envelope to be this one at least, to be velocity sensitive. I'm still not sure what to put into that quick bus, which is a little bit strange. Let's see what it says. I didn't know there was a standard gate bundle. Search box. Gates. Sorry, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to figure out, I think. Let's have a look and see if they used it in... I wonder if there's a call macro with it already in. That might be an idea. Maybe I don't even need to. Maybe it's actually just here straight away. I might have just gone completely mental. I don't need to. It's perfect. So sorry about that. I've just wasted 5 minutes of your time. SoundCloud is... I believe this is correct. Yeah, that's me. That's definitely me. Okay, so now I'll crack on with this. I don't know why I was bothering with all that stuff. This will work just fine. So input. We'll call that filter. I'll copy it. We'll call that amp. I put in the core cell. Now we need to get the filter. The 303, CB303 uses a 4-pole, 24 dB diode ladder filter. What you will see on some forums or posts and things is that it's got an 18 dB filter. Technically, that is not correct. How it is that it's a 24 dB filter. There are four poles in the filter, quite clearly 4, which makes it a 24 dB filter. But what happens is the filter is driven so hard that the slope of the filter, the upper harmonics which are cut out by the slope, are pushed, and the signal is compressed in the audio spectrum through distortion, and also overtones are generated through distortion, and it ends up being about 18 dB. So it's a 24 dB filter which is overdriven, and becomes 18 dB, which is a pretty complicated filter shape. But it is without doubt 24 dB. So, and it's without doubt a diode ladder filter as well, which is a sort of cheaper Moog type event. So we're going to go from in the library, in the audio, in there, and we happen to have a non-linear diode ladder filter. Thank you, Native Instruments. So in, make sure that is an audio event, and out. And we'll make sure that's an audio event. Let's have a look in there. Now, things we might want to have a little think about pushing if we're feeling saucy would be this saturation level. And we'll jump in. So Sat-L, that will go in there. So it's a tan-H saturator they're using here, which basically means that if a sort of normal signal does that, the very tips, the very loud bits of the signal get squashed down and distorted. That's what tan-H does, but it prevents it from clipping. And you can sort of drive a signal into that just about as hard as you like. But we could drive that harder in here by reducing the gain. The extremities, we can make it affect more of the extremities. If we drive this at tan-H harder, we'll make say the last 2 dB, we can make it the last 5 dB of the signal gets squished, or the last 10 dB of the signal that gets squished if we drive it harder. Or alternatively, we could just turn up the volume as it goes in, which is what I would actually suggest we do. In terms of scaling, the simplest scaling we can do, I've always found, is to use MIDI to control this. So this takes frequency in hertz. We're going to use a little converter again. We're going to go pitch to frequency. And then in. I'm going to keep that audio. I'm going to use an event smoother before we get there. Obviously, we want control over resonance. And that's going to be 0, 1. So I'm just going to put an input to that. I'm not going to, that doesn't need to be audio rate. We're not going to be modulating the resonance in real time. I'm not going to modulate the saturation level in real time. A better way of doing that would be to drive the input signal harder. Now, this high pass we are going to want to play with. That I want to be 1. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to use MIDI to scale it. So copy module and then paste. A new input. And the reason we do that is because the 303, in the feedback chain of the 303, it has a high pass filter. And the reason they did that was the ladder filter inherently loses bass. As you turn the cutoff down, as you get lower and lower on the cutoff, that way for you, as you get lower and lower on the cutoff of a 303, the resonance actually cuts out. So you get this massive bass bang, and that's a huge part of the 303 sounds. And so having this high pass filter in there, because, well, I'll explain what happens when the signal is fed back around. So you get a signal that goes through the filter, and then it comes back in. The signal is inverted. And that knocks out the sound and makes it quieter in a standard Moog filter. And you lose the biggest signal, which in this case is the bass signal. It's the signal with the most amplitude. So the high pass filter takes out the bass signal and just takes away the top end to attenuate. It means that the bass still gets through. So we need to set this up quite carefully and make sure that's the right slope. That's not a great explanation, but believe me, that is exactly what happens. So I'll try and explain it here. It comes out of our LP4. And at that point, it's filtered. And then it's fed back in. So you see there's a quite clear feedback loop. and we're using our high pass filter. So it lets through the low pass. We could low pass it as well, I guess. I don't know. No, just the high pass. But we're using that to invert the phase of the filter, effectively. Invert the phase, and then that will knock out the signal. And that is how a low pass filter works. Just like if you take an audio signal and you copy it and invert the phase of it, so you flip all the ones into minus ones, you'll knock everything out, you have silence. A low pass filter works in exactly the same way in this case. And what we're doing by cutting out the high pass bit is making sure that we don't cut out the bass of the signal that's going out. We do cut out the bass of the signal that's getting fed back, and that's how we allow the bass of the signal out. Oh, God. Complicated stuff, filters. Right. And we need to set up the sample rate. You don't need to understand that to use it, I would say, which is good. Okay, so just for now, I'm just going to work with the pulse wave. I'll put in that. I need a knob to go to that. That's going to be create control. I need to set the range of that to be 127 is a bit low, probably about 136 if memory serves correctly. So from about there, an easy way to figure out whether that's right or not is to actually do a pitch to frequency comparison. Oh, I also need to make all these mono as well. Control for that. I can't remember if that's the right resonance control. Let's check it. It will tell me what. So 0 to 1, that's fine. I'll copy this control, paste, and call that high pass. So I'd really like to make sure that's working now. And obviously I need to sort out the panel because it's going to be a mess. So let's just drag everything out of the way to start with. We're by no means perfect. And lock that down. So now, obviously it's not working as I thought it would. So again, I'm going to do some panel debugging. I'm getting signal there. I'm getting signal there. But I'm not getting signal there. I wonder why. There we go, because I'm not sending it any MIDI. Okay. And I've done that back to front. I'll set these up a bit better. Let's try without the filter. Why can't I hear that? Okay. So crazy mistakes aside, I'm starting to get there. One day I don't use auto-tune. Something else entirely. Reactor is incredible. Okay, so now I've got that working. Okay, so that's now kind of exactly the start of what I want to do. I'm going to use, so I need to set up my filter envelope as well, and to do that I need to add the output of the filter envelope onto the cutoff. But I also need to multiply it. Because I'm using MIDI scaling, I need to get that in the right area, essentially. So I'm going to multiply the signal out from my envelope, and I'm going to, at the moment it's 0 to 1, I'm going to multiply that by 127 will be fine. And then I'm going to multiply it by, well, no, what, I'll tell you what I could do. I could change that and just make a control, which is 0 to 127. Auto-tune rap stream at $10,000. Okay, so now I'll be getting I'll make sure I've got the right shapes. Ooh. That's good. We will get there someday. Okay. I'll move that out, and this is going to be my envelope amount on the cutoff. Of course, I'm modifying the wrong one. See, in my head I've got it set up that the filter goes first, then the amp. So I'm confusing myself, and I'll change that straight away. That's better. And I want I want it on 0. Although, look at that, we can set that to extreme hard, which is going to be useful, potentially for our drive section. Okay, so let's try out really pushing the signal in there. And to increase the gain of it, we just multiply the signal. So math is, that's a multiply right there. I'll make sure that's a mono. Constant, I'm going to, not constant, I want to control. And for this, I just want to have the minimum as 1. And then I'm going to chuck that up. Let's try 10. So I'm really going to push the signal into the filter. Struggling to use it a bit. There we go. Suddenly, it's starting to sound just a little bit like a 303. Not a driven 303, which is quite important. Let's change the pitch of the oscillator before I lose my mind and see how that sounds lower down, because that's quite a high signal to work with. I feel like we could use more drive as well. That's too much. And you hear it 0 on the high pass filter and the feedback of the filter. We've lost loads of bass. But halfway up, suddenly it's about right. I actually like that to go higher. I wonder if I can. I certainly can. Go higher still in that. I think probably around 30 is the max I want on that. And that's starting to do very much what I wanted to do. I need to set up some sort of slew limiter on the pitch so I can get the slide going. That's going to go in here. And I wonder if I've got something in here which I could use. I think that's about right. Now let's check how that sounds with. Okay, so there you go. That is also starting to get there. And of course I need to put in my guard signal on this. And my guard signal will be one very, very low high pass filter. And you can hear that that's done something to the sound right away. So, hopefully that's showing you that quite quickly. So that's an hour and 25 minutes. This is rough. I'm not trying to say it's anything other than rough or unfinished. Let's say that. This is obviously extremely rough and unfinished, but that is, without doubt, at least reminiscent of a 303. And let's listen to the one we did in 303 blocks. Yeah, I've got this crazy timbre thing on there. Let's cut that out and actually compare the two. It's a straight 303. bit more creep, which I like. But this is a bit more grit. So, at that point, I will leave it for today. I will be back later on today doing some game streaming. I'm not in the mood really to write music today. This has been fun. So that's two ways you can use Reactor to make 303 emulations. One is in blocks, it's super quick, super easy, super intuitive. The other one is obviously a bit more involved. This has got a long way to go, but that's how you can get to your basic 303 sounds using core modules. And ultimately, this way, this second way, is a lot more flexible. You can more easily build your sequencer in here, I would suggest, than you can in blocks. And ultimately, your sound is a lot more configurable. You can tweak the parameters a lot more easily, stuff like that. I hope that was useful to some of you. We'll see how things go. In terms of what game I'm going to play, I'm undecided. It's probably going to be an RPG of some description because I'm a bit of a fantasy nerd. Maybe Morrowind. Maybe some Baldur's Gate. I'm undecided, but we'll see. Yeah, so I'm going to take a break at that point because that was pretty intense mathematically. I hope everything was clear. I'm sure it wasn't. If you've got any questions on Reactor or what I've done today specifically, if this is what the fuck, then do by all means leave comments in the YouTube video and I will do my absolute best to answer them as clearly as I can. But yeah, everyone should have a 303. I hope that was informative for you. Okay, I'll see you in a bit.